welcome back to another episode of the Recession Resistant Real Estate Radio. I'm your host, Brandon Cobb, co-founder of HPG Capital. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about GDP, gross domestic product. It is a term getting thrown out a lot on the media these days. A lot of people don't even know what it is. I would be willing to bet that most people don't know how it's measured or the factors that influence GDP. And it's very important to know. The reason you're hearing it thrown out a lot right now is because we've had two consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth, which by definition means we're in a recession. And recessions mean businesses go out of business, people lose their jobs, people get cut from the workforce, there's not as much money going out around. There's basically an overall worse quality living than when there wasn't a recession, and nobody wants that. That's why everyone makes such a big deal about it. Their investments don't do well. And so I want to go and in this episode explain exactly what GDP is, how it's measured, the factors that influence it, and most importantly, how you can use this knowledge to your advantage to make money. But before we jump into it, if you've been interested in learning more about receiving passive income direct to your bank account through unique real estate investments, head on over to our website, hbgcapital.net. We look forward to getting to know you. Also, if you get value from these videos and this content, please leave us a review on our podcast and share this with your friends and family. All right, jumping into it, I've actually got the definition pulled up here. It says the main measure of an economy's output is GDP, or gross domestic product, the total value of all goods and services produced for final sale in an economy. It can be roughly viewed as the result of multiplying the number of hours people spend working by the value of output produced in each hour. So basically the total number of man hours, which means total number of working population times how many hours they worked, multiplied by the output per hour. That is how GDP is basically calculated. And if we can get ahead of the curve and understand these 6 variables that I'm going to explain to you here in a minute and how they influence GDP, you can get ahead of this by positioning your portfolio before the market, because the market is paying attention to what GDP does. If we know GDP is a leading economic indicator and we're seeing trends towards negative GDP, people are already going to start positioning their portfolio, and you basically missed your chance to hedge. And so by understanding these 6 variables, you're going to be able to get ahead of the market and position yourself before they do. So let's dive in. Number 1 is demographics. Demographics would be defined as the actual workforce and the number of people working. China had a really big boom when they switched over to the industrial age. You had all these people move from farms to cities. The amount of people working and thus the amount of man hours increased substantially, and therefore China's economy and GDP increased substantially. So the number of people working and the number of hours increase based on the demographics. And then on top of the demographics, you have something that's called determinants of inputs. Determinant of inputs would be the amount of people that you have of working age. So just because you have a population doesn't mean that everybody is of working age. And everyone who's of working age may or may not be employed. So the unemployment rate usually goes down during recessions, usually goes up during economic booms. And the number of people that you have working, or the determinants of inputs, is going to influence your GDP because it influences how many people are actually working. The third is aspiration. I like to use this example of comparing the United States with Soviet Russia. Stalin had a ton of people working. Everybody was working, but the conditions of which they were working didn't promote a lot of output. In other words, people weren't very motivated to work because it was socialism, it was communism, and there was no incentive to work harder or do better. Whereas in the United States, the American dream, where you can come over here and actually get what you're worth through hard work, blood, sweat, tears, and determination, that inspires people to work really, really hard and be very, very efficient in their output per hour. And this is what influences GDP, and one of the main reasons why America has been the most stable economy for so many years. The fourth factor is education. Education influences the amount of output per working man hour. The more skilled labor we have in the workforce, the more intelligent people we have in the workforce, brain cells equals productivity. Productivity equals output. More output per hour equals increased GDP. Very basic example, I think that you're going to see a slowdown in United States GDP for this reason alone, because quite frankly, I think that our educational system has been declining. I do not think it is what it used to be. I don't think that we're getting as good quality of an education anymore. And because of that, I think in the future, we're going to have less intelligent people entering the workforce. They're not going to have as much output, which is going to influence GDP. The fifth factor is technology. Technology is interesting because it has the ability to put old businesses out of business, which could reduce GDP. But usually what happens is there's a new business that's being introduced that is potentially increasing GDP. So technology does have the ability to put a lot of people out of the workforce, but it also has the ability to increase the amount of productivity or the output of each hour worked. You build a piece of software, and it does it, it can do its job 1,000,000 times, right? You build it once and it can serve 1,000,000 people. That's called leverage. So technology has this yin and this yang when it comes to output. The sixth variable is automation. Automation is mainly associated with how much output you're going to get per hour. Now that we have machines, you don't need somebody there who is having to serve out vending machine items, because you have vending machines now. The machine took the place of the person. Therefore, the output of something being produced is much more efficient because a machine doesn't get tired. It doesn't need food. It doesn't need sleep. It can literally just basically outwork human beings, which is going to increase the amount of output. So how can you use these 6 things to make you money? Well, I'm going to give you an example of what is going on right now. So right now we've got what everyone agrees is a declining economy. The stock market has been going down. The real estate market is kind of plateauing and actually dipping in some areas. I mean, all factors point towards us having a recession. Now, how bad it's going to be and the implications, we don't know. We've also got rising interest rates. Everything's getting more expensive, so there's not going to be as much money floating around. People aren't going to be quite as willing to spend money and kind of get things going, the juice back into the system. It's going to take a while to get sentiment back. But if you're able to understand these 6 variables and look at what the unemployment rate is, how many people that we've got in the workforce, is unemployment going up or is it going down? Is it shrinking? If you're able to take into account the economic circumstances that govern people's working condition, are people really motivated to work? Are they not really that motivated to work? Are they just being shadows of themselves every single day? If you're looking at the birth rate, is our population increasing? How many people are in the actual workforce? How many hours on average are we working? Is there a cap on the number of hours people can work? Or are we seeing laws and regulations and stuff being put in place that are capping the number of work hours? What new technology is coming out that's going to make us so much more efficient? Internet, great example of something that changed everything. Paying attention to these variables can allow you to say, I'm noticing some differences here. I'm seeing that the educational system is falling. I'm seeing that we're not producing as much automated technology, and that's going to have a negative impact on GDP. And if you know that it's going to have a negative impact on GDP and you're seeing all these 6 variables together point in the same direction, now you know it's time to start adjusting your portfolio and being a lot more defensive. Or in this case, if you see the opposite happen in a falling market as we have right now, you can adjust accordingly and get more offensive and take advantage of things before they start to turn around and make a big profit. That's all for today. Till next time.